and welcome to the Room of Requirement. My name is Megan, and I have over 25 years of occult and esoteric spiritual practice. And today I'm going to be talking about something very important, which is using discernment while navigating the ego while in service to others. So the ego is a very hard thing to be aware of and kind of navigate while you're on your spiritual path. This happens during the awakening stage and all different stages, especially on a way deeper level as you're further along and deeper on your path. And so we're always told, especially like when we're first seeking and looking, like we're always told that we are supposed to dissolve the ego and get rid of the ego. But we really need our ego. We need it to motivate us to do things, to live, to move around in the world, to get up and have any kind of motivation to do anything, to live out our dreams, to have self-confidence, all of these things. But the goal is to live with your ego with balance. So there's a hierarchy to your higher self and your ego. And when we're operating from the ego, it has jocked for position over the higher self. And so the ultimate goal is to have them balanced out and be operating more from your higher self and less from ego. And like I said, this is one of the hardest things to be aware of, especially when it's happening in the present moment. So this is what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Okay, so navigating ego while in service to others on your spiritual path. Embarking on a spiritual journey often involves a delicate balance between self-awareness and selflessness. While serving others is a noble pursuit, maintaining a healthy relationship with your ego is crucial to ensure that your service is genuine and effective. Understanding the ego. The ego is a part of our identity that shapes how we perceive ourselves and our place in the world. It is neither inherently good nor bad, but it can become problematic when it dominates our thoughts and actions. On a spiritual level, the goal is not to eliminate the ego, but to understand and integrate it harmoniously. The nature of the ego. Understanding the nature of ego is essential for personal growth and cultivating healthy relationships. By recognizing when our ego is at play, we can become more aware of its influence on our thoughts, emotions, and actions. This awareness allows us to make conscious choices rather than being driven solely by the demands of our ego. So this brings me to another point. So our ego operates through our five senses. And how it does that is it makes us driven to get something when emotions arise. Through our five senses, it makes us want to self-medicate when certain emotions come up, or get angry, or display certain behaviors because we feel our ego is threatened. Our ego is a protector. It wants to protect us. That's our number one goal, right? That's its number one goal, is to protect us from pain, and that can be emotional pain, physical pain, any of these things. And when it gets threatened, then it will emanate through our five senses, and then it will dictate our behaviors. So being aware of those things is crucial. And you can do this through being in the present moment, meditating, yogic practices, all of these different things. That also brings me to another point. So we have our logical thinking mind. Okay, that's our intellect. And then we have a belief system, which is our conditioned programming. And the beliefs is a very slippery slope. It can get quite dangerous when we believe in something. And then there is a knowing. And so that's what, when you know something for sure, then there is no doubt. Beliefs create doubts, and they create a narrow-minded thinking. And so how this ties into your ego is your conscious awareness of your subconscious programming, which makes the ego act out in certain ways. So having balance within those three things will really help you navigate your ego as you're going along on your path. The ego as a protective mechanism. So one aspect of the ego and its role as a protective mechanism, it acts as a shield, safeguarding our self-esteem and defending against threats to our identity. So this is your persona, your identity, your personality, all the things that make us us. So for example, when we face criticism or experience failure, the ego may step in to protect us from feeling inadequate or vulnerable. It can manifest as defensiveness or denial in order to maintain a positive self-image. So I had quite a bit of trouble with this because of my people pleasing that came, that led to overachieving and wanting everybody to like me, which was, my trauma. This, if you peel back the layers of an onion, this was all rooted in my past trauma that created these certain behaviors within me. And so when, for instance, I noticed I was making progress when somebody would say something to me that would hurt my feelings, and normally I would get really upset, and then I would start to have self-doubt, and my ego would take over, and I'd be like, oh, they're such jerks. I don't, why are they saying these things? And I would get angry, and then I would start questioning myself. Well, once I started becoming more aware, I started thinking, okay, they're speaking from their ego, which is their lens of perception through their own experiences. They're projecting their shadow aspects onto me. This isn't really about me. They are projecting their inadequacies onto me, and so they're trying to tear me down. So now when I have these types of interactions with people, I try to stop and think, and I'm not perfect, and it's really hard to do without practice, and I still have, slip-ups, but when I hear these things from people, I'm able to analyze them through awareness and realize that what they're saying and their behavior is actually coming from within themselves through projection of their own shadow self. And so once you start to realize this, then you realize that they're operating from their ego and your reaction is operating from your ego. But if you can keep yourself operating from the higher self, then your ego doesn't take over and feed into their ego, and then it doesn't cause any problems along the way as that's going. So the ego's influence on perception. So another fascinating aspect of ego lies in its influence on how we perceive ourselves and the world around us. Our egos filter information based on perceived notions about who we are and what aligns with our beliefs and values. This filtering process can lead to biases and distortions in our perception, shaping our reality through the lens of our ego-driven perspectives. Balancing individuality and interconnectedness. While ego serves important functions in maintaining personal identity, it can also create barriers to meaningful connections with others. When unchecked, excessive egocentricity can hinder empathy, cooperation, and collaboration with those around us. Finding a balance between asserting one's individuality while recognizing the interconnectedness of all beings is crucial for fostering healthy relationships and societal harmony. So once you become aware of this, and when you're operating from ego and when somebody else is operating from ego, instead of blowing up and getting angry and maybe not pursuing a friendship or a deeper connection with someone, especially those we work and live with, then we can start to foster more empathy, understanding, and patience with these people. And then, we can foster way better relationships with them when we start to understand instead of just reacting and then leaving and then, just writing them off and kicking them right out of your life because of, your ego was challenged. So this is how this plays into your relationships and how you can create more harmony and balance within that. Cultivating self-awareness. Developing self-awareness is key to understanding the role of ego in our lives. By observing our thoughts, emotions, and reactions without judgment or attachment, we gain insights into ego influences, our perceptions, and actions. So when somebody says something to you, just, if you're aware, when you act from not being attached to what they're saying and letting it change your behavior in the moment and not judge them for what they're saying and realizing that it's just coming from their own perception, then you get less reactionary. And so that's where the magic starts to happen with people, and you can build stronger bonds. Transcending the ego. While ego is an integral part of our human experience, some philosophical and spiritual traditions propose transcending it for a greater sense of peace and interconnectedness. This involves recognizing that our ego-driven desires, attachments, and fears can lead to suffering and dissatisfaction. By shifting our focus from self-centeredness to compassion for all beings, we can start to break free from the limitations imposed by ego. Recognizing the symptoms of ego resistance. Emotional responses. Emotional signs of ego resistance are very clear. People might feel frustrated, angry, or sad when their ego is challenged. These feelings show the ego's fear of losing power or being less important, showing a fight between the ego and the spiritual self. Behavioral indicators. Behavior can also hint at ego resistance. Some common actions include avoiding spiritual practices that test the ego, criticizing other spiritual paths, and not wanting to see different views. These actions are ways to protect the ego from threats, showing inner conflict. So I see this all the time, and I was even guilty of it, is criticizing other people's path, what they practice, what they're doing, what level they're at, and seeing yourself above them or more superior because you've been doing something long enough, or you're doing what you deem a higher level or higher vibrational spiritual practice. That this is not the case. So try to operate less from this, because you don't really know where somebody's really at and what their level is and what they're going through. So it's really important to not judge somebody just because they've been doing something longer or doing a different practice, or because that hurts your ego and then you get envious, and so that can create problems too. Just try to be mindful of that. Spiritual discomfort. So spiritual discomfort happens when our actions don't match our true selves, making us feel stuck or unhappy. This feeling is a strong sign of ego resistance. It shows our current spiritual beliefs and practices don't align with our higher goals. Knowing these signs of ego resistance helps understand our spiritual journey. It leads to deeper self-awareness and personal change. So that's about being authentic and transparent with what's really going on. And when what we're doing doesn't match with who we truly are, that's when there's a lot of friction within us, and then we project that onto other people. So here's some signs that you're operating from a spiritual ego rather than your soul. 1, don't acknowledge your ego. If you assume you don't have an ego, or perhaps you have transcended it, then you're operating from spiritual ego. 2, you believe you're above others. Your sense of self-worth is through the roof, so much so that everyone else is below you. 3, you're trying to be more advanced than others. If your mission is to become the most advanced spiritual person out there, you're likely operating from spiritual ego. So, this one right here, this is about not believing that you're going to be the best and most advanced and trying to outdo others. I know this is kind of hard, and I struggled with this because I was like, oh, I want to become so enlightened. I'm going to go harder. I'm going to do more. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be that. And this happened early on when I was doing this because I wanted it so badly. I wanted to become enlightened so badly. And eventually I figured out that, you can't operate in this way because everyone's different and everyone's going to be coming from a different place and have different practices. And that essentially is not the goal. The goal is to just surrender, accept, and flow. And so no one's better than anybody else. Everybody's learning at their own pace, in their own time, on their own timeline. So just kind of be mindful of this. 4, you lie or exaggerate or elevate your position. You may find yourself exaggerating experiences or making them up completely to feel more spiritually advanced. This is also about being authentic and transparent. And being honest with yourself is more important than anything. And there's nothing wrong with where you're at. Don't feel ashamed because you haven't been doing something longer than someone else, or you didn't know, or somebody said something that proved you wrong, or something like that. You have to kind of let all of that go. 5, you compare yourself to others. This leads into what I'm talking about as well. If you operate from a spiritual ego, you need to be the best. Because of this desire, you may find yourself comparing your progress to others on your spiritual journey. Yeah, don't do this. You're just going to lead to more suffering on your end when you do this. 6, you become overly identified with spirituality. So this is kind of, this doesn't mean don't pursue your spiritual path with discipline, at your own pace and at your own level. This means, like, I mean, I'm not saying go out there and like be a monk. And this doesn't mean stop like what you're doing, but basically it's a sign that you have spiritual ego is when your life revolves around spirituality rather than living. If you don't have an identity outside of spirituality, then you have spiritual ego. So I wanted to like clarify this. Your path is your path, but if you're not living your life and, you know, socializing with your friends and family and your spirituality becomes your whole identity, that's a little bit dangerous. And it's different for like people that are completely devoted, like monks that have dedicated their whole lives to their spiritual path, like monks and nuns, priests, all of these things. That's a little bit different. But what I'm trying to get at is like the average person, you don't want to be doing this 24/7 and forget to live. You still have to have life around it. It doesn't mean you need to quit practicing so much. Quite the contrary. But I just kind of wanted to explain this a little bit. So 7, you lack curiosity. People with spiritual egos often assume they already know everything they need, therefore they don't explore themselves in depth, and this is another sign that you have spiritual ego. 8, you're always positive. Now this leads into toxic positivity. I talked about this in another one of my videos. This path is not all love and light, and if somebody is telling you it's all love and light and be positive all the time, you need to run for the hills, because that is not how this works. So part of spirituality is to explore our shadows. People with a spiritual ego may get caught in the trap that they must always be positive because they must believe they have to transcend their darkness. This is called spiritual bypassing. 9, you lack transparency. People with a spiritual ego tend to cover up their dysfunctions, which leads to a lack of transparency with oneself and others. So also, you know, putting people on pedestals like gurus, famous people, things like this, and trying to compare yourself to them, it is not a good thing either, because you're seeing what they want you to see. And so you're not seeing the whole picture. So this happens a lot, you know, with celebrities and all of that stuff. You really never know what people's true intentions are and what they're doing. And when you start to put people up on pedestals, you'll be let down very, very quickly, especially in the spiritual realm. 10, you believe you have transcended your humanity. So people with a severe case of spiritual ego often believe the rules of reality no longer apply to them. They believe they don't need to age, eat, drink, or what makes the individual ungrounded. So this is a really extreme case. You will see this like in fringe spirituality, when people will say they live on light or just air, like things like that. 11, materialism. Overly identifying with things in your life is a sign that you have a spiritual ego. You may become materialistic by believing you deserve to have all these things. 12, you're secretly judgmental. You tend to value someone depending on how far along their spiritual journey they are. Examples of operating from ego while in service to others. Serving others is often seen as a selfless act, but it can sometimes be driven by ego. So here are some examples of how ego can manifest in the context of serving others. Recognition, seeking behavior, craving praise, performing acts of service primarily to receive compliments or accolades, public displays, sharing acts of kindness on social media solely for likes and validation. So we see this in the public all the time, on the news, with celebrities, with certain people. We will see this. They will post, oh, look what I've done. I've done this, and they want you to see them in a certain light. So we see this all the time. Status enhancement, engaging in service to elevate one's social standing or reputation. So a lot of corporations and companies will do this. Control and superiority, dominating decisions, insisting on being the leader or decision maker in group service activities. Imposing views, helping others with an attitude that your way is the only correct way. Feeling superior, believing that your help makes you better or more knowledgeable than those you are assisting. Conditional assistance, expecting returns, offering help with the expectation of receiving favors in return. Withholding help, choosing to assist only when it benefits your personal agenda. Transactional mindset, viewing acts of service as transactions rather than altruistic efforts. Emotional validation, seeking sympathy, helping others to elicit sympathy or admiration for being so selfless. Emotional fulfillment, using service to fill a personal void, to feel needed. Avoiding guilt, helping others primarily to alleviate personal guilt or shame. Self-image and identity, identity attachment, defining oneself by the acts of service performed rather than the impact made. Competing in goodness, comparing one's service to others to feel like a better person. Narrative control, crafting a personal narrative of being a hero or a savior. Recognizing these ego-driven behaviors can help individuals refocus their efforts on genuine compassion service to others. Ways to help balance the ego. Work through the layers of your spiritual ego. Catch the thoughts when they arise. Constantly challenge your ego. Do the shadow work. Deconstruct your spiritual programming. Get out of your head. Avoid spiritual bypassing. Practice modesty. Be integral to your teachings. Be genuine about who you really are. Use your spiritual ego as a mirror. Acknowledge when you're wrong. Encourage people to challenge you. And live from the heart and not your mind. The role of discernment. Discernment is the ability to judge well and distinguish between what is beneficial and what is not. It is essential for identifying the ego when the ego is interfering with your service to others. By honing your discernment, you can ensure your actions are motivated by genuine compassion rather than a desire for recognition or validation. So here are some steps to cultivate discernment. 1. Self-reflection. Regularly take time to reflect on your motivations. Are you helping others out of genuine compassion, or is your ego seeking validation? 2. Mindfulness. Practice mindfulness to become more aware of your thoughts and emotions. This awareness can help you recognize when the ego is influencing your actions. 3. Seeking feedback. Invite trusted friends or mentors to provide honest feedback about your behavior. This can offer perspectives that you might not see. 4. Set intentions. Before engaging in service, set a clear intention focused on the well-being of others rather than personal gain. Balancing self and service. While it is important to serve others, it is equally important to take care of yourself. A well-balanced spiritual path includes time for self-care and personal growth, allowing you to be more effective in your service. Tips for balancing ego and service. Set boundaries. Establish clear boundaries to prevent burnout and ensure you have time for personal reflection and growth. Practice humility. Recognize that everyone has something to teach and remain open to learning from those you serve. Express gratitude. Regularly express gratitude for the opportunity to serve, which can help keep your ego in check and your focus on the bigger picture. Embracing the journey. Navigating the ego while in service to others is an ongoing process that requires patience and compassion, both for yourself and those you serve. By cultivating discernment and maintaining balance, you can ensure that your spiritual path is both fulfilling and impactful. Remember, the journey is just as important as the destination, and embrace each moment with an open heart and a discerning mind. Okay, so I thought I would give you guys one example. This happened to me a couple of weeks ago of discernment while in service to others. So I was coming out of Walmart, and there was a lady behind me, and I seen her out of my peripheral vision. She was really far back there, but I was like, you know what? As soon as I walk 5 feet out, this door's gonna slam. She's pushing a cart. I'm just gonna hold the door open for her. So I made the choice to do that. So I just hold the door open for her. And I look up at her, and she is just crying, just like sobbing. And I was like, I was using my intuition. I was like, oh, okay, I don't know if I should say anything here. You know, I'm just not going to. I don't want to upset her even more, so I'm just not going to say anything. And so at that moment, I was using my discernment, because a lot of people are going through a lot of things right now, you know. And so anyway, we're walking, and then I notice we're walking together for a long time, and I'm like, oh, and then I realize that we are parked right next to each other. And then I was like, I just kind of was like, okay. I looked over at her and I said, you know, it's going to be okay. And she just started sobbing even more, and she started like just going off about how expensive groceries are, and how, you know, she can't afford this, and how do they expect us to live like this, and she was just like going in this tailspin. And I was like, oh boy, okay, like I know exactly how she feels, but right now she does not need to hear some profound spiritual thing from me right now. And I checked my ego. Okay, so I recognized when I needed to use my discernment, and I recognized when I needed to not be operating from ego. And I said, you know, I'm so sorry you're going through this right now. I know exactly how you feel. You know, I had a breakdown a couple days ago over this, and you know, it's just all going to be okay. And she kept, you know, venting some more, and I said, look, I don't, all I know right now is that I just need to tell you that, like, you're not alone, and that it's going to be okay. And she finally kind of calmed down a little bit, and she turned and looked at me right in the eyes, and she said, well, thank you. You know, thank you. I really appreciate that. And then I said, you know, it's going to be okay. And, you know, I hope your day gets better. And I walked away, got in the car, and I literally just prayed for her. I said, you know, Divine, please send her love and light. And I hope that, you know, she has some peace and release from this. So that was an example of how I used my discernment to know if somebody, you know, I knew she didn't need that from me right at that moment. I wanted to help her, but I got my ego in check. It wasn't going to throw some spiritual stuff on her, because I knew that's not what she needed at that moment. She just needed someone to listen to her, and she needed someone to say, you know, you're not alone. So I just wanted to give you that quick example of how I used both of those things to navigate through the day. So I hope this one has really helped you guys. Thank you for sticking around this long. I know it's been pretty long, and I will see you guys next time around.